to her.
It's almost as if she knew something was going to happen.
Chopped up in a body bag and left behind some building. Why leave her that way?
The fact that she was killed somewhere else and then moved, that's just a very bold statement.
I just want to know why.
There was a person who was in the area the evening that her body was placed.
I think he knows where her remaining body parts are.
Around this neighborhood, you're smart enough to know. Shut your mouth and mind your business.
How many years is it going to take to not be afraid anymore, to want to step forward?
Lisa Monahan, News 9.
These people are still out there. 10 years.
Hello?
Do you not know what those guys are capable of?
What did she say to you? I just want to talk to you.
We're sorry. You have reached a number.
You can only kick down so many doors.
You recognize her?
You can see that there's speckles here.
But that's evidence left behind. Your name keeps coming up in this investigation.
We have the Homeland store right here.
They think you're getting too close.
When you say she's living on the street, where would I find her?
Don't ever jeopardize yourselves for these answers.
Did you kill Carina Saunders?
No, I did not.
She was found in a field just right over. Did you kill Carina?
I've never murdered anybody.
We're here. Let's go.
You kidding me? You think this is somehow safe? Please leave.
Oh, right down there.
I think that getting too close definitely jeopardizes your life.
One way in and no way out.
So why are all these people coming up dead?
I just want to ask you a couple of questions.
The less that I knew, the better off I was. You know, I want the answers, but not at the cost of somebody else's life.
Someone savagely killed 19-year-old Carina Saunders and continues to get away with it. For a decade, investigators have come up empty-handed. Suspects and evidence have seemed to fade, and friends who ask too many questions have met tragic ends. I'm investigative journalist Lisa Monahan, in search of the answers Carina's family deserves.
Butterflies remind me of Carina. It's like she's saying, don't give up on me. It's really a spiritual thing. The caterpillar basically dies. The caterpillar turns into the chrysalis, and then a butterfly is born from the essence. And that's why the butterfly is significant of rebirth. It's just so miraculous.
The butterfly in its brief existence can leave a lasting impression on the grief-stricken, a powerful representation of life, and in Carina Saunders' case, death.
When we put her here, this whole part of this cemetery was empty practically.
Margie Queen and Richard Saunders know this place well. The feel of the breeze on a warm autumn day, how the sun warms the headstones. Maybe they know it too well. A decade after the murder of their daughter, Carina's parents would like nothing more than to bury something else here: their grief.
It's hard to keep believing and hoping.
But they have warned us there will be no tears this visit. They refuse to give Carina's killer or killers such satisfaction.
I've even thought up scenarios to spit in their face.
And yet they've kept their composure all these years through the case's traumatic twists and dramatic turns.
So you don't want to approach certain things with revenge and anger on your mind. And yet it's still an open case. So where's the justice?
10 years is a long time, A decade of opening old wounds and reliving the unimaginable in the slim hope that it might help. They have refused to give up, putting themselves out there time after time, daring to believe it will all someday pay off, that break in the case will come.
I would like to be face to face with some of these people that might possibly know something. I would like to see their face. I would like for them to see my face.
Do you know what you would say?
What happened to my daughter? What did you do to her?
There are so many questions, haunting questions that demand answers. Why did Carina Saunders end up here? She was only 19. Her body dismembered and shoved into bags. Who would do such a thing?
What could she have ever done? And why her? And for what purpose?
And the most unsettling, did she suffer?
I picture her crying out for me. I couldn't be there. That's what tortures me, and I hate using the word torture because she was tortured.
The murder of Carina Saunders, while torture for her parents, was a major news event when it happened and has gripped me like no other case has in my career. 2 months and still no arrest.
We obtained confidential information earlier this month. Charges would be dropped against the 2 suspects.
With so many twists and turns in the case since
someone savagely murdered the 19-year-old. Now 3 weeks after our exclusive report.
For 10 years, Carina Saunders' family has been waiting for justice. For Carina's parents, the horrifying story began well before we picked it up. A story of a smart and loving 19-year-old with a promising future.
She was still a teen, 19. It's not like she was living out homeless for years and years and years. She was just barely out of high school, A year later, this happens.
October 13th, 2011 is where we come in. Bethany police began working the case and called on the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to help with the crime scene.
I recall it being a very warm day, and there certainly was an odor of decomposition.
CSI agents immediately roped off the wooded area behind the grocery store at Northwest 23rd and Rockwell.
This is a disposal site. You don't know what could be out there. So is it just the body? Do we have other physical evidence?
With the investigation underway, we delivered the shocking news. Body parts had been discovered strategically wrapped in plastic, put into a duffel bag and a smaller laundry bag, and hidden in plain sight along a tree line in Bethany, Oklahoma.
Obviously, those are areas where we want to concentrate our search for evidence. Evidence could be as small as, a shoe wear impression or hairs or fibers or small things like that.
The search kept everyone in suspense, but they never found evidence pointing to the killer.
We have several names that we are following up on. Right now, we're not putting them out as persons of interest.
As Bethany police began digging further, they discovered Carina was connected to the drug trade. Dealers, users, and addicts, a dark and well-concealed underground. An impenetrable organization in which people are too afraid to talk. And if they do, it's only enough to throw investigators off.
When you have a witness, you have to gauge their truthfulness by their motives for cooperating with you.
Bad information poisoned the investigation in its early stages, but that didn't become clear until Bethany detectives made 2 arrests in July 2012. At that point, Gary Eastridge, chief investigator in the Oklahoma County District Attorney's Office, began vetting the case for prosecution.
I kept looking for something that connected the 2 suspects with the victim, and I couldn't find anything definitive in my mind.
Eastridge soon discovered the detectives had based the arrest more on statements from alleged eyewitnesses than actual evidence.
In this case, many witnesses were addicted to methamphetamines, There were things that were told by witnesses that we knew were factually inaccurate.
Prosecutors had no choice but to dismiss the murder charges. To this day, witnesses are still changing their stories, and the statements as to how and where Carina was killed conflict with each other.
Meth use is not the only challenge. There was no crime scene ever identified.
To this day, there's not been a crime scene.
It's a case that begs to be solved if for nothing more than peace of mind.
So how to work this case, you just start from scratch like any other case and document your evidence as well as you can, follow every lead.
We are committed to doing just that, exploring the many theories surrounding this complicated case. Was Carina's death retribution for an unpaid drug debt? Did she die to settle a score? Or the unfathomable, was her murder a case of mistaken identity?
I'm the last one that seen her at the casino. I'm the one that dropped her off. And it's haunted me for the rest of my life, the fact that I could have been her.
Next, we launch our own investigation, chasing down leads in dangerous places.
There's certain people that have dug a little deeper, that have walked into certain areas that they didn't walk out of.
I think that getting too close definitely jeopardizes your life.
The devil's in the details. There were several theories as far as the motive for the murder. There's lots of suspects in the case. Because of some of the lifestyle choices Carina had made, she made that suspect pool very deep. There were numerous people who could have a reason to commit the murder.
Hidden somewhere in this network of people is the truth of what happened to Carina. But finding the truth means first finding people willing to talk.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.
This case is a dangerous case. You can never be too safe, especially when dealing with someone who's capable of doing that.
We've agreed to hide your identity. Can you tell us what you're most afraid of?
These people are running free right now. They could do it again. They're dangerous people.
Those people, our confidential source says, are part of a mostly invisible society that operates in the darkest corners of the Oklahoma City metro and follows a strict no snitching code. Does it have you looking over your shoulder?
Yeah. It's just a scary environment to be around.
It's where Carina lived out her final days and where investigators have concentrated their efforts. No? Okay, that's what we're trying to find out. I tracked down the original detectives, Jack Jinks and Austin Warfield, hoping to find out more about their investigation. Both are retired now. They left Bethany PD amidst criticism of their work on this case, and despite repeated requests, declined to be interviewed. The investigation is currently in the hands of the OSBI, which took over the case when irregularities were found with the Bethany investigation. Because Carina's case is still active with the Bureau, her file is protected by a state law that prohibits the agency from releasing reports in the investigation. So we set out to launch our own investigation and spent the better part of a year in search of new leads. Covering Carina's murder for 10 years, it wasn't hard to put together a list of the case's key players and places. It would be much harder to turn that list into real leads. People in this life don't want to talk. Just finding them can be hard enough.
At the time, Saunders' family told News 9 Massey knew about the murder.
It took us years to track down Jimmy Massey, one of the men originally charged with Carina's murder. But in 2020, we convinced him to answer our questions and face Carina's parents.
But did you know her?
No, I've never seen her. That is what I'm asking. Like, why did y'all single me out? Who was this girl that said all this stuff?
Your name came out of her mouth.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. All right.
We also arranged for Massey to take a polygraph test.
Did you cause the death of Carina Saunders?
No.
No deception indicated. You passed this test, okay? You did really well.
Hell yeah.
Then there's Luis Ruiz, the other man initially charged with Carina's murder. Prosecutors also dropped the case against him, and he settled a wrongful arrest lawsuit. we've been unable to find Ruiz since his release.
Okay, you ready? Let's go.
But we were determined to find others. Looking at the map, we focused in this area where the lines blur between Oklahoma City and Bethany.
That's 911.
The shadowy areas of the 15 square miles surrounding the field where Carina's body was discovered in bags.
We've got a smell and a large black bag that has been hidden here, and we're not sure what it is. I think maybe you guys better check it out.
Our research showed most of the people connected to Carina's case were within close range of the crime scene in 2011. Some are still here, while others, felons with long rap sheets, are in prison. We were warned other people tried to find out more about Carina's death and turned up dead.
There's certain people that have dug a little deeper, that have walked into certain areas that they didn't walk out of.
Focused on Carina, we decided to proceed, but with caution.
I'm investigating the unsolved murder of Carina Saunders.
Wow.
Do you have any information you can help me out with?
Carrie Strobel is related to a person of interest in this case and says authorities have questioned her through the years. Early on, we went after people like Carrie, who were relatively removed from the situation, hoping they could safely give us information that would get us closer to the truth.
Everybody who was involved in this has split.
Why?
They're all scared.
I've been trying to find her.
She's on the street, literally. She's on ice and she's on the street.
I've been trying to track her down for some time.
Oh, you're the one she's running from.
She couldn't point us to the person we were looking for, but claimed to have information about a possible crime scene, a house where Carina was rumored to have been killed.
It was set on fire.
The house was set on fire.
The house is now abandoned.
The house where this happened.
The house is all blacked out. All the windows are all blacked out. The windows that are standing are all blacked out.
Who owns that house now?
I don't know.
Carrie says she went by the house a few years after the murder, but couldn't remember the exact address. She tried to take us there.
We were on just this street of MacArthur, and the off-ramp was directly on this there.
Now, Carrie couldn't remember the exact address of the house, but says she went by there a few years after the murder. She tried, to the best of her recollection, to take us there.
It will all make this whole story will make so much sense when you see that.
Okay.
But with the passage of so much time, it was evident that memories had faded.
Now, if I go straight, it dead ends.
But then you should be able to see a highway. We walked all the way down.
It also didn't help that the landscape had changed.
Can you see what you're talking about from here?
No.
Oh, right down there.
So after making the drive a few times,
Is that council?
we decided it was best to move on. We put it in our rear view, but I couldn't let go of the fact that Carrie's recollection of an abandoned house set on fire was very similar to investigators' narrative a month after the murder. A burnt-out two-story house known for drugs and prostitution is how Bethany police detectives described a possible crime scene in 2011.
There was some people coming and going all hours of the night, you know. It was strange.
Witnesses told detectives Carina was tortured and killed at an abandoned home in South Oklahoma City.
I know there was 2 or 3 girls at one time over there.
Of the girls that you saw, did you ever recognize this one?
I think I seen that gal here. I think I have.
Bethany police used witness information to zero in on an exact location, 3500 South Harvey. Despite it being a 20-minute drive from where Carina's remains were discovered, it had to be explored, if only to rule it out. Back then, detectives Jinks and Warfield followed the lead and made a shocking discovery. The house, a potential crime scene, was gone. I searched public records, but couldn't find anything to suggest authorities had attempted to unearth evidence at that location. Others who have reviewed the case believe the tip was a long shot in the first place.
It never made any sense to me that the murder would happen miles and miles in both directions from where the body was recovered, and then that they would transport that body back.
So I had to get creative to find out more about this mysterious house and how or if it's relevant.
I figured it probably happened. I figure it probably happened right here.
Up next, some digging on the internet uncovers a connection between the fate of the house and the fate of Carina Saunders. Is it coincidence or something more? October 13th, 2011. The same day a missing person case turned into a gruesome murder for police in Bethany.
We're learning more about the body found in a duffel bag in Bethany yesterday morning. Tonight, we're told they believe it's that.
On the other side of town,
the ME has done a preliminary exam.
Something else was coming undone. The dilapidated two-story house at 3500 South Harvey was leveled. Detectives didn't know it at the time, but the demolition of that infamous drug house, just as Carina's remains are being discovered, could have destroyed key evidence in the case. Within months of the murder, women loosely associated to the initial suspects, Luis Ruiz and Jimmy Massey, went to police claiming they'd been kidnapped, blindfolded, and taken to the Harvey drug house, where they were forced to watch the torture and killing of Carina Saunders. If true, the timing of the demolition seemed too coincidental to ignore.
When I heard about it, I thought, man, it probably happened right there.
I started scouring the internet for any connection between Carina and the house. According to online records, an Oklahoma-based property investor purchased it in July 2011 and got rid of it 3 months later. The demolition permit we discovered was submitted to the city October 12th. The approval was date-stamped October 13th, 2011. The house came down that day. I reached out to the investor to ask why he bought the house in the first place. Records show he bought and kept other properties in the area. Why did he get rid of this one? Did something happen? This is Lisa Monahan with News 9 in Oklahoma City, calling again about your property at 3500 South Harvey. I've been trying to reach you for a few months now. Countless calls went unanswered. I couldn't help but think he may have also ignored calls about the property back in 2011.
I went over there to complain about something, and I knocked on the door, and some gal answered the door, and I looked in there, and there was all kind of writings on the wall and stuff.
More than just an eyesore, neighbors described the house as a hotbed for drugs, prostitution, and violence.
People coming and going all hours of the night.
Bob Witt is the landlord at the apartment complex adjacent to the now vacant lot. He's been in the area for nearly 30 years.
It wasn't normal. They were stealing water from my hydrant over there. I don't even think there was any utilities on in the house. This guy that was living here or whatever, he was shady. I mean, he's the type you need to be careful.
Witt had a sneaking suspicion there was more to know about what went on here. I can understand redacting the witness information, but why the suspect? So I decided to check with Oklahoma City Police to see if any major crimes had been reported at that address around the time Carina was killed. If so, those reports could contain information to help us identify this mysterious man we kept hearing about.
One particular guy. I've seen him more than anybody.
Like, how would you describe him, if you could?
Wishy-washy.
I requested the 911 calls from that location and received a list of about a dozen, all made within a year of the murder. 4 were serious enough for police to make a report. We looked through the reports for even the slightest connection to Carina. Nothing jumped out, but details of the crimes did fit with her lifestyle at that time. And we were able to confirm that convicted felons, sex offenders, drug dealers, and prostitutes were at the house in 2011. We also discovered police seized an array of guns and ammo, methamphetamines, and sex toys from the house before August 2011, before someone set the house on fire. The arson report didn't reveal much. Specific details of the fire were buried in reports that are not available to the public. And Oklahoma City Police heavily redacted the report before turning it over to us. The suspect's name was blacked out. We didn't have much to go on, just a partial description. A man in his early 40s, thin, approximately 5'10", with brown hair and eyes. It wasn't much, but it sounded familiar.
He was shady.
A big, tall guy or a small guy or?
medium size, probably 1 or 2 taller than me, probably slender than me. Oh, he was probably 10, 15 years younger than me.
Do you ever see anyone that fit that description around here?
Witt thought the sketch closely resembled the person he'd been describing to us, but wasn't certain.
That could have been the guy that I seen coming and going.
The OSBI released the sketch in 2020 after a witness came forward to report suspicious activity near the grocery store around the time of the murder.
I think this person said, oh, wow, I think that maybe I was there long enough or saw something that maybe no one else has reported on yet. And then there it is by itself. If I pick the eyebrows, okay. In this instance, there was a person who was in the area the evening that her body was placed.
Special agent and forensic artist Travis Smitty interviewed the witness who remembered seeing a man in the field where Carina's remains were found.
We try to put them back into the moment and ask relevant questions that help us focus on the individual more so than the event itself.
After the interview, what happens?
The way that I like to proceed with these is you start with a basic face shape. Facial tones, mustache. We spend a lot of time focusing on facial features and the actual, the uniqueness of the person themselves. Once we've got the lips right, the nose right, the ears right, the eyebrows right, then we can add on the eyes. And once we've added on the eyes, that's when we really know if we're on track or not. Eyes are the most important part of a face that really draws people to who are you.
Several years after the encounter, the witness still had impeccable recall that allowed them to create this composite sketch.
Whatever we end up creating, that is essentially, it's their drawing or their composite. I am just a person that's trying to help them wade through all of this multitude of options.
Unable to put a name to the sketch or the mystery man at the house on Harvey, we decided to follow up on the landlord's other lead. The graffiti he described on the walls inside the house.
I knew I wasn't going in that house because I seen stuff, paint or whatever it was, scribbling on the walls. Couldn't tell you what it was.
Although he couldn't tell us, I knew someone who possibly could.
I spent probably at least 2 or 3 years documenting what was going on that house.
Brian Bates of JohnTV.com was working in the area as an anti-prostitution activist in 2011.
Of all the landmarks in the South Robinson area, it was probably the most prolific. It could be known drug dealers, definitely known pimps. We would videotape all the comings and goings, trying to make people nervous there. But honestly, that was one of the residences where none of the standard tricks really worked. Nobody cared.
It was so bad, Bates wouldn't go alone to document the fire.
The place just gave you the creeps. There were needles strewn about, there were condoms strewn about. It was just not a safe place, and it certainly was not a welcome presence in the neighborhood.
I wanted to see for myself what the inside of the house looked like, if it truly matched with how witnesses described the crime scene. It is a rare perspective and one that could help us determine if Carina was in the house prior to her death. It certainly sounded like a place Carina would have gone with friends.
Yes, it was just a place to hang out to do the drugs.
Gabby Mize would know better than most. She was one of the only high school friends still hanging out with Carina in the end. She described a house eerily similar.
We hung out there and smoked meth or whatever, but I have a very slight memory of the front of the house. I know that it had a carport, and there was a tarp thing on this side, like I think to make like a wall or something, and that the guy's bedroom was the garage. Like, we walked straight through to the garage.
What was his name?
I don't know. I have no idea. I know he was a tall, slender guy.
Yet another reference to the unknown man. But Mize said something even more significant.
The first time we were there to get high. And so we just were in this guy's garage, and we just smoked, and I colored on the walls with a Sharpie, and Carina, I think, colored somewhat, and it was just like random doodling, like really.
She mentioned the doodling to me more than once. She couldn't confirm if the house was in fact the Harvey house, but I thought maybe I could by looking for evidence of their artwork or Carina's name in these images of the house. Much of it is indecipherable. I noticed several scribblings in permanent marker, smiley faces in paint, and red smears on the doors. also disturbing are handprints on the walls, huge chunks of missing sheetrock, and apparent death notes. But was this the same house? It seems inconclusive. Sources have told me in August 2011, a frustrated neighbor spray-painted "Dope House" all over the exterior of the house, and that hours later, the alleged drug dealers moved their stuff out of the house and set it on fire.
I could certainly see someone being afraid of something that may be found in that residence, so they went back to destroy it, and fire would be the easiest way to do that.
Are you glad it's gone?
Oh, yeah.
It's gone, and likely so is any evidence. Was this a miss in the beginning? Eyewitnesses say detectives were here in June 2012, 8 months after the murder, in what was described as a simple ground search. We checked and couldn't find any paperwork to show detectives dug any deeper, raising the question. The house had obviously been destroyed by the time detectives got here, but why not check below the surface? If investigators had dug in on every lead in the beginning, they could have pulled the old pipes to test for blood evidence. And at the very least, they'd have a better understanding of why this area is unsettled now.
There's something out there, that mound of stuff that's out there.
We tracked down the wrecking company and confirmed the house had a basement prior to the demolition. We can't say for certain what's pushing the ground up, but if a basement still exists, could evidence be buried in it? The only way to find out for sure would be to use ground-penetrating radar to look for an anomaly. 2 different companies denied our request to perform the test. What if Carina's missing body parts are buried underneath?
I don't know why somebody hadn't come and checked and seen what that was.
Investigators eventually dig somewhere else, though, and uncover disturbing items hidden below. We'll explore if their discovery also unearths some answers.
I dropped her off there. I met the man, and he seemed to be an upstanding person, claimed to be a safe house for many people who had meth addictions, and they came to him as a safe haven. She swore up and down that he was a good guy, so I left her at his house in his care. I wish I'd have killed him then.
With the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation digging literally into the so-called safe house in 2017, Richard Saunders recalled just how reluctant he'd been to leave his daughter there 6 years earlier.
When you have a 19-year-old addicted to drugs, yeah, you're afraid for her all the time because you don't know where she's going to end up.
The concerned father tried the direct approach.
There was a conversation, and it was probably one of those where you should listen to your daddy. Daddy knows best. You shouldn't be doing this. You need to stay away from this type of living.
When that didn't work, he tried intimidating those around her, including the man at that house.
I told him, said, anything happens to my little girl, I'll come after you first. And then when I did go back looking, he wasn't there.
He's not found Kenny Richards, and neither have we, yet.
According to what I was told, that house right there was Kenny's. That's where I've knocked on that door many times.
The 54-year-old has been notoriously elusive since Bethany police first questioned him in 2011. He's never been arrested in connection with Carina's murder, but he has quite a rap sheet. I pulled his criminal arrest record to help us track him down. He's been in and out of prison a lot, convicted 12 times in Oklahoma, not for violent offenses, mostly drug crimes. Looking more closely, I noticed Richards had a different address on nearly every arrest report after Carina's death. A check of public records databases indicated Richards moved into the alleged safe house in the mid-90s. He moved out within a year of Carina's murder and then kept on moving. It certainly made us wonder, what is Kenny Richards running from?
Hello.
Mr. Richards, Lisa Monahan.
Yes.
Carina's family is suffering, and I'm hoping that you can help us help them.
We'll explore what put Kenny Richards under suspicion and why we're determined more than ever to track him down in just a moment. For now, let's dig in on his backyard as the OSBI did in search for evidence in Carina's case.
These types of investigations are challenging.
In 2017, armed with a warrant, a team of CSI agents led by Captain Beth Green excavated portions of the property at 504 and 504.5 Oakdale.
We're not dealing with the primary scene, and we're not dealing with a fresh scene either.
The agents were acting on a tip that was several years old. In 2013, an anonymous email claimed Kenny Richards buried Carina's clothes and missing remains in a metal tank on his property. That information was somehow overlooked by the original detectives and only later discovered by the OSBI in its review of the suspect pool. We were there for the dig. When you are going to conduct a search like this, what do you know about the property going in? How do you prepare yourself for this sort of search?
We look at Google Earth images, because the Google Earth images will have oftentimes historic images, and so you can compare those and see if there's any, changes to the terrain.
What could changes to the terrain indicate?
Sometimes you can see, okay, we used to have a structure here and now it's gone. Other times you can see on Google Earth disturbances in the ground.
In this case, Google Earth provided no conclusive evidence the ground had been disturbed. Certainly, there had been plenty of time for someone to dig up and possibly relocate evidence. Hopefully, the excavation would provide some answers.
Anytime we're doing any searches for clandestine graves or buried evidence or whatever, they're very methodical searches, and we use what's called ground penetrating radar. And what we're doing when we use that type of equipment is we're looking for below the surface level abnormalities.
The CSI team spent 3 days searching the backyard.
This isn't like getting out a backhoe and just, digging a pool, and you're just trying to get as much dirt as possible at this with each scoop. There's finesse to make sure that we're scraping, small amounts of dirt at a time.
They never uncovered a buried septic tank as the tip suggested, but something similar was uncovered in the front yard.
I remember a big tank. I don't think it was a septic tank. It seems like it was just like a trash, or maybe an old charcoaler or something like that.
Hidden inside it, a woman's shirt, a jacket, and a pair of sandals. Investigators also collected a folding knife during the excavation. They never said if they believe the items are connected to the murder. Further review of the search warrants indicate investigators had hoped to find something else. The same tip suggested a phone containing video of Carina's murder was in Richard's car in 2013, but it has never been found.
Now, that doesn't mean that there hadn't previously been evidence there that was removed.
That is always a possibility if someone thinks that they're starting to be looked at, that they could.
Absolutely, especially when we have years going by.
At this point in time, you feel confident there's no evidence buried there?
I would say yes. We wouldn't have left the scene if we felt like there were other areas that we needed to search.
So you overturned the entire backyard?
I can't say that we overturned the entire backyard, but I feel like we did a complete search.
There are limits to what Captain Green can tell us, given that this is still an active investigation. But some people close to the case told us the search of the Oakdale house is not complete.
And I thought, they don't look like they're digging in the right spot. They have a secret underground there.
I wonder why they haven't dug under that house to see what actually is under there.
Several people have alluded to a sunken vault or hidden tunnel system.
I've heard firsthand from the people that dug it. Supposedly it started out being a well. I never saw it, but Kenny himself told me about it. So he said that if you guys would have been looking hard enough, that you would have either found it or found something.
Running down this lead was beyond our capabilities, but the OSBI would have the authority. Is it possible the correct area was not searched?
Based on the information that we had at the time and have at this point, I do believe that we did a thorough investigation. I mean, obviously, if anybody has information, we want it.
We gave OSBI the information about a possible bunker or tunnel system under the house, but they have not indicated if they intend to do anything with it. In the meantime, I can't help but wonder, is this the place where Carina spent her final hours? Someone is keeping a dark secret. We just need to keep pushing to shed some light on it. We need to delve into Carina's life in the weeks just before her murder. What was she doing?
She started hanging out with different people.
They were very much a bad influence on her.
Her closest friends say she'd become distant.
She didn't seem to be in a great place, but she, you know, there's nothing I could do. I just told her, you know, be careful.
Carina had graduated from Mustang High School a year before them and quickly went out on her own. And it didn't take long for those friends and her family to become leery of her new lifestyle.
All the stories that she would tell me about the people she was hanging around, guys and girls, I'm like, no, that's bad. They're bad for you.
She was struggling with drug addiction and living with her new boyfriend at the Rockwell Arms Apartments in Bethany, the apartment complex directly across from where her body was found.
I think he knows something that he's not saying.
Carina's boyfriend would have been a natural suspect, except that he was in jail at the time of her murder. He'd been picked up on an outstanding warrant more than a month before her death. In July 2011, police responded to a report of a domestic dispute and found the boyfriend had been beating on Carina. He went to prison and was not released until days after Carina turned up dead.
Every time she was around, and it was all bad.
The boyfriend is one of the only people in Carina's circle who had a solid alibi, but that didn't stop police from searching his apartment. We know he and his father were questioned by police shortly after the murder.
I just don't want to be on the news.
Okay. He refused to talk with us, but I'm not sure he would have provided any relevant information about Carina's final days. After all, he was locked up.
I even talked to her, please, you know, go to rehab, consider rehab.
With the boyfriend out of the picture, Carina tried to get sober. She went to rehab August 16th, where she met a guy. She left the program early, but the two of them had made plans to battle their addictions together at his home in Kanawha.
Do you think her leaving rehab was a defining moment?
Oh, yeah, because she wasn't ready to get out of there and she wasn't strong enough to stay away.
Still, by all accounts, Carina seemed happy with him and on the right path. And in mid-September, she made a surprise visit home 1 week before her disappearance.
There was just an aura about her that was just really beautiful and really sweet.
That weekend, Carina spent time with her father and went to a baby shower with her high school friends.
When you saw her at the baby shower, did she seem like normal Carina from high school, or had things changed? What was she like?
She was really happy. She was still her goofy Carina self, always could make us smile and laugh.
When you look at the house now, what memories come to mind?
I feel sad. I feel sad.
She also spent the night at her mom's house in Mustang.
I just look back to that weekend because there was just something about her.
Margie didn't know it then, but September 18th would be their last day together.
I think she was on her way. I think she's on her way to coming back to us. She was really happy to be where she was. And when we went to church, she gave her life to Jesus. She raised her hand. She earned herself a place in heaven.
And a special place in Pastor Steve Cowan's heart.
It's just like there was like a spotlight on her that day. And she just, like she hung on every word, like she was searching or looking for something. And then I gave the invitation, you know, who's really having their life changed by Jesus. She looked up and made eye contact with me. She said the prayer, and it was awesome to see that.
And I remember we just embraced in church, and I hugged her, and I didn't want to let her go, and I was crying. And it was just the most beautiful thing ever.
Grateful for their time together, Margie took Carina back to Kanawha. She drove away thinking they'd finally reached a turning point.
I remember driving away, and they were in the backyard, and she was leaning against the chain link fence, kind of looking out away from me, you know, just looking out into the sky. And that was my last time I saw her.
Looking back now, she wonders what went wrong from that point. Did Carina know something bad was about to happen, or was her murder a mistake? To better understand Carina's final weeks, we started from scratch building a timeline of her movements. We found Carina took some drastic measures to stay sober. She sought salvation, even tried to physically remove herself from the temptations of the city by moving to Kanawha. It didn't work.
She'd come to the house, but then after a couple of weeks, she started going back and forth to the city, using again.
Staying away from old habits proved difficult for Carina, and eventually her intended rehab partner decided it was best to part ways.
I told her to load all her stuff back up, and I begged her to go back to her mom's.
He couldn't remember when, but guessed it was within a couple weeks of her disappearance.
And she wouldn't do it. She had me take her to a trailer park in Valley Brook.
Known as a haven for strip clubs, Tiny Valley Brook is home to an inordinate number of sex offenders and is rife with crime, making it a notable mark in the timeline. It's not clear who Carina visited or what she did there. It is clear she didn't stay long.
I believe that there was somebody threatening her. I believe that somebody was scaring her and trying to manipulate her.
By mid-September, Carina was at her cousin Catherine Bloodworth's house.
She's always looked up to me, and I haven't lived the most solid, life.
Catherine admits she was probably not the best influence at that time.
I started working in the strip club, and then from there, I got introduced to prostitution through a boyfriend. So I was living fast. At some point, she had asked me for help and wanted to do some of the things that I was doing during that time, and of course I said no.
Instead, she offered Carina a safe place to stay, under one condition: no drugs around her kids.
I didn't know who was picking her up in the middle of the night from my home. I didn't know how she was getting back and forth. She would just come and go, come and go.
Within a week, Catherine says she found drugs in Carina's purse and made a tough decision.
This was our deal, like you wouldn't have anything at my house. Call someone, call one of your friends, I'm dropping you off.
With no phone, no car, and now no place to stay, Carina turned to Facebook, posting, "What's everyone doing tonight?" It apparently worked because that night, September 28th, Carina asked to be dropped off at the Taco Bell near I-40 in Rockwell to meet a friend.
That's when I saw it was an old man, and I was just like, who is that? She said, that's my sugar dope daddy. If you don't help me, then this guy will, type of deal. Out of anger, I just didn't help her out of anger, and I knew I was supposed to. And I knew better.
Catherine blames herself for letting Carina leave with someone who she thought clearly had bad intentions.
It was my fault. In the moment, I even knew better, and a lot of people don't say that, but in that moment, I knew what I was supposed to do, and I didn't.
She says it was the last time she or anyone in the family saw Carina alive.
And I don't even know if maybe once we find out who did this and why and all that, I still don't know if I'll still be able to forgive myself. Like, that's something I'm just gonna have to live with,
As painful as it is now, her encounter helped Bethany police identify the man Carina left with that night as Kenny Richards, a 44-year-old drug dealer who allegedly promised to turn Carina into an amateur porn star.
He can get aggressive and mean.
Do you think he's capable of something like this?
I think anyone in his situation would be capable of it.
And that may help explain why no one who ran in Kenny's circle was able or willing to tie him directly to Carina's murder. We'd have to go straight to the source. Your name keeps coming up in this investigation. Kenny Richards had dodged us for years. He's been in prison several times since Carina's murder on various drug convictions. Most recently, federal agents busted him in connection with the international drug trade. His case file revealed he had a suspicious photo of Carina on his phone, but the exact nature of it has been kept confidential. I wrote to him several times in prison, but he never acknowledged my letters, so we decided to keep tabs on his parole and be there when he walked out of Jackie Brannon Correctional Center in McAllister. Corrections officials had other ideas, though, and kicked us off the property.
When you cross back over here,
calling the cops next time.
Persistence, however, paid off. A couple of weeks later, he called us.
Hello?
Mr. Richards, Lisa Monahan. Carina's family is suffering, and I'm hoping that you can help us help them.
Kenny Richards is key to filling in gaps in the timeline, starting with what happened after he picked Carina up September 28th.
We weren't doing anything. She called me for a ride.
Did she ever indicate that she was in any sort of trouble?
Not at all.
Richards says he just drove Carina to the Rockwell Arms Apartments, where he watched her walk between the buildings and fade into the night.
I asked her who she was going to see there, and she goes, that was none of my, she is my friend's business. That's what she told me, and I drove away.
Richards is adamant he never saw Carina after that night. And although we couldn't find evidence suggesting otherwise, we still had to ask the questions that for 10 years now, so many have been asking.
Were you pimping her out?
No, I've never pimped anyone out my whole life.
So you never made a sex tape of Carina Saunders?
No.
I also asked him outright if he killed Carina or had some other role in the murder.
Absolutely not.
So you weren't made to clean up Carina's murder?
Hell no.
Investigators had received a tip that Richards was seen using bleach to clean up a car he had borrowed around that time.
He was driving my car, this car out here. The cops came to my house up there in Oklahoma City, and they thought that the blood that was in the back of it might have been hers. I didn't know that he was using my vehicle to do all this kind of crap.
We found the car and could see where investigators took a sample of the carpet, presumably to test. We're not privy to the results of their test, so we did our own.
For there to be that size of a marking, that's not someone that just like cut their hand putting something in the back of this vehicle.
You can see the big swipes.
I just thought that it was over by now. You know, it's been so long.
On site, we had presumptive positive for human blood and shipped 2 samples to a private forensic lab. Both came back negative. Then there's women's clothing that the OSBI found buried in a metal bin on his property in 2017.
I've raised 3 girls in that house. I'm sure they're going to find the stuff they found, but just none of that stuff had to do with Carina.
If not Carina, how about Brittany Grisso, a stripper found dead at Richards' home about 5 months later?
They say she shot herself.
Do you believe she shot herself and you didn't hear it?
I normally would have heard something, I'm sure, but there's all sorts of rumors about that, too.
Adding to the mystery are confidential police reports we obtained that show Richards told police he didn't see a gun at the scene, and investigators never mentioned one either. Still, Grisso's death was ruled a suicide. By all accounts, Grisso and Carina were friends. More uncertain is whether they were together at any point in the final weeks of her life.
I mean, I don't have anything to do with either one of those girls' deaths.
Back on the timeline, before Carina's death, September 30th, Carina got a message from Matthew Kyle Savage asking to hang out. We're not sure if they ever met up, but records show they exchanged several messages in the 3 months before Carina's murder. Toward the end, Carina sent and received warnings that Savage was, quote, bad news.
Hi, guys. Hi. I'm trying to find your son.
Savage's father tried to convince him to talk to us, but he refused.
He said, no, I don't. I think he's just fed up with her.
Savage was a suspect early on when it was discovered he sent threatening messages to Carina's cousin Catherine saying, I'm going to bury you next to Carina, before anyone knew Carina had been killed.
Did he tell you he's innocent?
Oh, yeah.
Savage told investigators he was just riled up and didn't mean what he texted. The next 6 days are tough to pinpoint. Several statements indicate Carina was running around with Judy Roberts, an ex-convict she'd befriended at a casino in Newcastle 2 weeks before her death. We'll delve into Roberts and her associates shortly, but there's one other point on the timeline to discuss first. Carina was spotted on October 6th or 7th at the Studio 41 apartments at Northwest 41st and MacArthur.
I just hear, hey, Keegan, how you been? And I didn't recognize her right away, but as soon as I turned and saw that big old smile of hers, it clicked.
Keegan Zimmerman knew Carina from high school and admitted he was a little caught off guard to see her working outside of his apartment.
And we sat and chatted in the courtyard, and she just She seemed a little guarded at the time, a little to divulge too much about her life.
But Carina did reveal she'd been staying with the apartment's handyman and son, helping around the complex to pay them back. Did she let on that she was in any sort of trouble during the time that you guys spent together?
I don't think she was around the right people at the time, but something wasn't right.
He can't remember the handyman all these years later, but says several aspects of his last interaction with Carina have stuck with him.
I noticed that she looked skinnier than I had ever seen her. So I asked her, hey girl, when was the last time you ate? You know, and she said, you know, I don't think it's been since breakfast yesterday. And whew.
Keegan gave her something to eat and a place to hang out for a bit. When he realized Carina was living out of a small frayed laundry bag, Keegan says he gave her a green duffel bag to store her things.
I said, hey, let's toss your stuff in this. This is a little more sturdy. You know, when you're living on the road, you gotta make sure everything's secure, you know?
He says Carina was grateful for his generosity, and as he dropped her off at an unknown location, she seemed proud of that new duffel bag.
I have some new developments tonight.
Keegan says he didn't see Carina again. That is until she appeared on the news.
My heart seized so hard when I heard she was found in a duffel bag. I thought that could have been the one I gave her.
To Keegan's relief, it was not. The autopsy report indicated Carina's body parts were found inside a black Nike duffel bag and a small laundry bag. Her hands, feet, forearms, left breast, and clothing were missing.
I remember distinctly her remains coming into the office.
The medical examiner found residue of duct tape around her thighs and suspicious bruises on her right cheek and right shoulder. The evidence led investigators to believe Carina may have been tortured before her death.
With this case, the body told us a lot.
The medical examiner couldn't determine if Carina was alive during the dismemberment, but it was clear the killer made attempts to conceal her identity. The autopsy revealed cut marks around a distinctive tattoo on Carina's back that indicated the perpetrator tried to remove it and cut her long hair to 3 inches. This plays into the mistaken identity theory. Was it an attempt to make Carina look like someone else? What part of it haunts you the most?
The fact that I could have been her.
We tracked down the last person to see Carina alive. She vanished from the Newcastle casino October 8th. Did someone send her into a dangerous situation to save themselves? We ask her the tough questions next.
You know how many body shops I hung out at? At 2 o'clock in the morning? 1 million of them. Because that was the place to go. If they were chopping them cars up or if they were slinging anything, then you knew where to get it.
A place to get drugs, but a decade later, we're hoping this body shop can provide something else, information.
We're investigating Carina Saunders' murder. Do you have a spot where we can talk?
She was just 15 back then, running around with her mom in search of their next high.
I've seen things, and that's all that I needed to see.
She says she's clean now and doing legitimate work on cars, but because of her past and because she's the last person to see Carina alive, she didn't want to show her face.
I live a life of being scared every day.
What part of it haunts you the most?
The fact that I could have been her. With the way that my mother was dragging me around, she was dragging me into drug houses and places and people who were murderers and who were doing it for fun.
She believes her mother, Judy Roberts, a 38-time convicted felon, did the same with Carina, dragging her into dangerous situations in the final weeks of her life. The admitted con artist and drug runner is in prison now, but was connected to multiple drug rings, seemingly willing to work anywhere she could get in on the take.
Newcastle was the spot at the time. So that's where we always were.
Newcastle is also where Roberts befriended Carina within 2 weeks of her death. They were almost inseparable, which is why investigators were interested in Roberts' whereabouts the night Carina vanished.
I honestly felt the less that I knew, the better off I was.
Roberts' daughter claims her first involvement with Carina was when her mother dropped Carina off with her at a house in Newcastle.
My mother said that she was going to go and get some more dope and left.
Hours later, Roberts' daughter says she took Carina to the Newcastle casino. She remembers dropping her off shortly after midnight on October 8th.
We pulled up into the parking lot and she got out. And when she got out, she was heading for the door and then bolted to the left down the aisle there in the parking lot, and that was the last that I had seen her. There was a car that was sitting over there that was full of girls that were hollering, "Don't get in the truck with them." But by that point, I didn't care.
Roberts' daughter actually gave investigators a slightly different account of what happened, telling them her mother was with them and that Judy Roberts, quote, ran right into the casino while Carina climbed into a red truck with a group of men. In 2016, the OSBI released a picture of a similar looking truck.
The photograph actually depicts very clearly the pickup we're looking for.
Investigators announced surveillance cameras at the casino captured Carina getting into a red four-door Ford pickup. A photo of the actual truck and surveillance video of the alleged incident have never been released to the public. The OSBI's description of the truck's occupants was also vague.
Some of the men inside this red pickup, there were several we believe, one of them, at least one, had tattoo sleeves on both arms.
The men were never identified. They, the truck, and the witnesses in the casino parking lot remain a mystery to this day. Certainly, a release of authentic images would have helped identify the truck and perhaps even the people Carina left with, if she was in fact at the casino that night. Did security cameras capture Carina in the parking lot of the casino, or is her last known whereabouts based on witness statements? We asked to review the video to verify Carina was at the casino that evening, but the OSBI denied our request because its investigative files are confidential. We'd have to rely on paper trails instead, and almost immediately we noticed holes in Roberts' alibi. Roberts claimed she and Carina had been staying at the home of James Donaldson, known as Kitchens, in southeast Oklahoma City, up until the day Carina started hallucinating on drugs. She said it was at that point she decided to get Carina out of there to keep her safe.
Kitchen is as dangerous as they come. He was taking orders from somebody in a prison and was more than happy to kill anybody just to get a hand on them.
We were unable to reach Donaldson, aka Kitchens, but he denied any involvement when he spoke to investigators, and he told a very different story than Roberts. A week before Carina's disappearance, he said Roberts told him she owed drug dealers money and they were threatening her and her daughter. Roberts had supposedly stolen a carload of meth. The dealer had called to discuss her debt, and that soon after, Carina began hallucinating. Kitchen said he asked what Roberts gave Carina, and she told him not to worry about it. He said the two left his house with an unknown Mexican male. Days later, he said Roberts called him crying, yelling, and was not understandable. Within a day or two, Carina's body was discovered. Under interrogation, Roberts claimed drug dealers put a price on her head because she refused to run drugs between Oklahoma and California. She feared they killed Carina when their actual intent was to kill her daughter. Both were young women with dark hair who were often spotted with Roberts. In this photo shared to social media in 2011, Roberts' daughter had what she describes as short hair.
Back then, I had black and red hair. You could tell a difference. My hair was short and cut like a bob. Spiky hair in the back and kind of longish hair in the front.
She didn't give us the specific length of her hair, but indicated Carina had long hair the last time she saw her. According to the autopsy, Carina's hair was only 3 inches when her body was discovered.
I think she was misplaced for somebody else.
The mistaken identity theory is common among Roberts' past associates, including this informant whose identity we agreed to hide.
If I'm seen in this state by anybody, then I'm gonna get killed.
And why would someone want to kill you?
Because I know too much. I have too much information. Well, I heard it from Judy herself. Judy spent a bunch of drug money at the casino, and then she couldn't get the money back, and she was getting in trouble. I think Carina just kind of walked into it and she had no idea what she was getting into.
The informant claims Roberts convinced Carina to make the drug run in her place to pay off the debt.
She was going to go with whatever guy picked her up to go take a drug run to California and come back. And then she was going to get paid for it. That was really the beginning of her end.
It's not known where Carina went after leaving the casino October 8th, but 2 days later, October 10th, she called her friend R.C. Reed from a blocked number to say she was fine and hanging out with some people. When he asked who, she hung up. No one ever heard from Carina again. She was reported missing that day. Trying to figure out who she was with October 10th, we followed a lead behind prison walls. The inmate received nothing in exchange for information.
She was being made as an example, but I think it had more to do with the drugs and the cartel, money, all of it wrapped together.
The inmate told us drug gangs were involved in making Carina pay off a debt. He claims his relative was forced to deliver her.
The last word she was saying when she dropped her off that night was to tell her mother that she was sorry.
The inmate stopped short of saying anything else that could help push the investigation forward. He was afraid of turning up dead, as others have. Francisco Gomez, a.k.a. Pancho, was named in a 2011 drug bust connected to Carina's death.
Do you have anything to do with the killing of Carina Saunders? Nothing to do with nothing, man. No drugs, no murder, no nothing.
Search warrants revealed Gomez had bragged about his role in the killing and claimed to have a video of it. He died in prison of a meth overdose.
If you look at the timelines, you'll see that it's just like, why are they dying out of nowhere?
Sarah Saunders kept track of all mysterious deaths connected to her sister's case until 2015, when Carina's high school friend Gavin Bolschweiler disappeared while looking into her murder.
It just haunted him, and he wanted to find out who did that to her. He couldn't let it go.
Gavin's mom, Corinne, says her son refused to give up, risking his own life to find evidence in her murder.
He would go to places and knew people, and he knew bad places around Oklahoma City where things happen.
Gavin was running in those circles in the weeks before his disappearance. While she's not sure what he uncovered, Corinne believes it was enough to get him killed.
He was murdered. When they found him, they smelled him. They smelled the smell of death. And that's why they thought initially it was an animal or something. And then when they investigated, they said, oh no, this is a person, we need to call somebody.
The medical examiner couldn't say for sure how Gavin died, but the autopsy found evidence of blunt force trauma.
He was laying this way. His scalp was probably right about here.
6 weeks before the gruesome discovery, Corinne began retracing Gavin's steps, just the same as he'd done with Carina's.
This is where his body was found. This is the door they wrote stuff on. At one time it said, nothing you say is worth losing your life over. Oh, talk to me. If I could just reach out and touch him.
As a result, Corinne fears her son's death will remain as much of a mystery as the one he'd set out to solve. Although Carina's family wants to know why she was killed, they don't want anyone else to be buried here.
I want the answers, but not at the cost of somebody else's life.
Like many investigators before us, we retraced her final days, but were unable to get definitive answers as to who killed Carina.
One day down the road, I've got to say there's an end, and I'll be happy. One day down the road, I'll find that forgiveness, but right now, I'm going to stay closed-minded until I find out the truth.
10 years after her murder, Carina's family is hopeful our efforts will breathe new life into the investigation.
I still strive to maintain that hope. When I see a butterfly, I think of Carina and God's strength. I feel like she's with me.
They still desperately want justice, because justice, they believe, has the power to transform violence into peace.
I'll find out one day, whether it's here or in heaven.
If you have any information that can help law enforcement with this investigation, you can directly contact the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation by emailing tips@osbi.ok.gov. You can remain anonymous.